Okay, so today I want to talk about Luigi's Mansion 2 and why that game of all games is getting ported to the Nintendo Switch and not something that might be a better fit, which we will definitely get into that. But to first preface, I do want to say that Luigi's Mansion 2 sold amazing numbers. I think that answers itself for a lot of people. It's sold a lot, so therefore it makes sense to port it to the Switch. For me, it's sort of like, look, between the three games, I think that Luigi's Mansion 2 is the weakest entry. I think it sold a ton because there's a lot of people that grew up with Luigi's Mansion 1, and so there was a generation that was able to self-advertise Luigi's Mansion 2 for everybody, or Dark Moon if you're in the US, as well as just younger kids that are more into horror games than ever before, with things like Five Nights at Freddy's and Poppy's Playtime. Luigi's Mansion 2 comes out around this time, not as Poppy's Playtime, but definitely Five Nights at Freddy's, and it's just the right time to reintroduce Luigi's Mansion. On top of that, people are looking now for more interesting experiences, whereas back then on the original GameCube, something like Luigi's Mansion was not as appreciated because we wanted to see the next evolution of 3D Mario, not an inventive title starring Luigi. But like I said, during that time, it was like the perfect time, and so the numbers for Luigi's Mansion 2 skyrockets. So then it greenlights a Luigi's Mansion 3, and a lot of people that had certain complaints with Luigi's Mansion 2 thought Luigi's Mansion 3 was great, minus some things that maybe we can talk about in another video. But for the most part, the idea was that Luigi's Mansion 2's shortcomings were that you were picking little zones out of a map screen instead of exploring one giant mansion, where there's a level of immersion there that gets lost when you're picking a level, essentially. And also, the ghosts were way more howdy-doody than the original Ghost from Luigi's Mansion. That's the best way to put it. The theming and everything is a lot safer and a lot more inviting than the theming from the original Luigi's Mansion, which, although was not intended to scare children, still had enough scary vibiness that it would scare small children and also some really, really sensitive adults. So anyways, point is that Luigi's Mansion 3 addressed a lot of the complaints of Luigi's Mansion 2, and so it kind of sits as the weakest link between the three games. Fast forward to now, we're getting a port of Luigi's Mansion 2 instead of games that were, in general, said to be amazing games, like Kid Icarus Uprising. Everybody would love to see a port of that game in particular because the core game is great. The visuals were great on the 3DS and would look even better on a Nintendo Switch. And on top of that, the biggest complaint was the controls, which means that if you were to port it to Nintendo Switch, they'd have to readjust the controls to actually work on a Nintendo Switch, ergo making it a superior version of the game. So lots of people want to see Kid Icarus Uprising. Lots of people also wanted to see The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds, because it was a fantastic pseudo-sequel to A Link to the Past. It uses the general same map layout, but there's an open-endedness to the gameplay that revolutionized the series in ways that we kind of ended up seeing in Breath of the Wild. So a lot of people would have loved to have seen this game in HD because it was all around just a game that sold well. It also was highly praised amongst fans, and people would have wanted to just see it come back during a drought for Zelda games. So, a bit strange, but those two games in particular, and then for me personally, I would also have loved to have seen Samus Returns put in HD and put on a Nintendo Switch console, because there's a lot of fine details in that game that are hard to see because the camera's panned out so far, given the nature of a 2D Metroid game. I am one of those people that falls in the camp that I thought it was a great remake of the original 2, because the original 2 really did need a lot of improvements. And we saw that here with this remake. That's my personal thoughts. That's not reflective of every fan of Metroid. I've seen lots of opinions on that game. But point is that there's three candidates that would be great. I think some other people might say things like Tomodachi Life and stuff like that. But for the most part, we can focus on those ones and sort of compare and contrast as to why those games weren't chosen instead of Luigi's Mansion 2 or Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon. And the biggest reason of all that I can think of is that the original creators of Luigi's Mansion just happened to have an opening where they could make a port like that. Therefore, they were able to approach Nintendo and say, hey, we would like to port this game, and Nintendo gave it the green light, and so the original creators are working on the title, and it's just an easy transition, basically. Doesn't mean it was easy to make, but it was just an easy way to green light the project. Whereas something like the number one best choice, Kid Icarus Uprising, Masahiro Sakurai is either taking some time off or is secretly working on the next Smash Brothers game, no doubt. And so to get him back on the project would probably be next to impossible. I think that even the team that he worked on that game with, it may be defunct. I know that he has an interest in seeing it ported regardless of his involvement because he said so on his own YouTube channel. Still, it probably comes down to the fact that him and his team aren't readily available to approach Nintendo and say, hey, we would like to take some time out to port this to Nintendo Switch. And so there's probably more channels involved in order to actually get a project like Kid Icarus Uprising greenlit to be ported over. Because I have seen in the past that certain properties at Nintendo need to be approved by certain people that originally worked on the title, such as Punch-Out! Punch-Out! Took forever to get a sequel and then finally got one on the Wii, simply because the creators at Next Level Games convinced Ginyu Takeda to allow them to use the IP, only because they were talking about the motion pad and how that would be effective for the title. It was a Trojan horse, though, to get a traditional Punch-Out! Game on the Switch, or sorry, on the Nintendo Wii, and thank God for that. Point is, with that little story there, you gotta have a lot of people involved in order to actually even get a project greenlit. There has to be a team that even wants to do it. I don't think that what we're looking at here is an executive that looks through a list of 3DS games and goes, you know what? Let's get a team on top of this one. I don't think it works like that at Nintendo. And so that's why it might be confusing to some people as to why Luigi's Mansion 2 of all games gets ported to the Nintendo Switch instead of something that could really, really use it like Kid Icarus Uprising. And again, it's all theoretical. It's armchair speculation here. So please, take it as a grain of salt. But as far as just kind of like analyzing what information has ever been given to us, throwing that into a blender and coming out with theories as to what the heck is going on behind the scenes, I think that's basically what you're seeing here, is that sometimes you get some strange ports like Mario vs. Donkey Kong. To me, that is a very, very strange remake. And I say that because even the original core gameplay has a much better game that could have been remade, like Donkey Kong 94 on the original Game Boy. Not only is it just simply a better game, sorry, just going to be very blunt about that one, but also the original game just has monochrome graphics and it's 8-bit, so it would have highly benefited from a remake. But the problem is that the original creators aren't around to make that project come to life. But the original creators of Mario vs. Donkey Kong are available, and it was the original team or original development studio that wanted to go back and remake that game. Ergo, it gets the green light, and now we have a very strange remake to an okay game from the Game Boy Advance era. So that's why you're seeing a couple of remakes that kind of like feel a bit strange. It's clear that Nintendo is opening the channels to doing remakes to any studios that are interested in making them. And so that's why we're seeing a lot of remakes lately, like with Mario RPG remake or Mario and the Thousand Year Door remake. Like, so many great remakes are coming out, but there's also a bunch of strange ones. And I think that ultimately what comes down to whether or not these things get greenlit is completely on the hands of the original developers or the original creators and their eagerness to approach Nintendo executives to pitch these ideas. I think that's basically where we're at. And so I think that we're going to continue to see a couple of strange remakes in the future. But hopefully this also means that we're going to see a bunch of amazing remakes in the future too, for any interested developers that want to make them. I'm really excited about the future of remakes. This channel is almost becoming like a channel dedicated to remakes and just discussing them, because it's such a fascinating topic and it's hotter than ever to see remakes coming out in this day and age. And again, if you want to ask me what I personally think of remakes, I'll say it here in this video. I think that remakes are super important. I think in the world of video games, remakes makes more sense than like movies or any other medium like a television show or whatever, because with video games, the technology, the gameplay, the quality of life improvements gets better and better as we know more and more about video games, and technology gets better and better. So there's sometimes games with amazing core gameplay or an amazing story that deserves to be retold, but it has such old graphics or an old combat system, and a remake can do so much to modernize that experience to allow people of all audiences to enjoy that game again or for the first time ever in an easy way. And so I love remakes. I love to see more of them. No, I will also address people's core complaint with remakes. I don't think that remakes take away from new IP or sequels coming out. I think that's ridiculous. And we also see plenty of video game sequels coming out every single year. That the notion that remakes somehow take away from that is ridiculous, because honestly, if you want a new game or you want a new sequel to a game, just pick a year in the last 10 years and I will gladly point you to several great choices for you. That being said, that means to me, remakes fit very, very well and very, very comfortably in this space of game options to choose from within the game industry, and I'm excited to see more of them in the future. Games that I would love to see remade, like I said, Kid Icarus Uprising, Samus Returns, that 3DS one, I'd love to see a port of that at least. And as far as other remakes go, I want to see, number one would be Earthbound remake with claymation style, like the claymation that you see in the player's guides for that game. I'd love to see that, but maybe for another time I will do a whole video on remakes I would love to see. I think that'd be a really fun video. Let me know if you'd want to see it, and if enough people express an interest, then I will greenlight that project and put it out to you. All right, that was a little Nintendo joke there. Guys, if you can, please hit subscribe. It helps me out a ton right now. I'll probably stop asking at like 10,000 subscribers, but in these really, really early stages, your subscription is vital and it'll help the channel grow exponentially a lot faster. So if you could hit subscribe, that'd mean a lot. You're just going to get more opinions that are of this quality in the future. And if you enjoyed this video, thank you. I just appreciate that. All right. Well, anyways, take care.